Episode 5 Mask Play. My sincerest apologies. Prince Ashel bowed once again. That is enough already. Please return to your seat, Prince, or rather, a man should not carelessly lower his head. I softly gave him my candid advice. Seeing him bow to me so much is quite unpleasant. Indeed. For someone who stands on the top, it makes you question their ability. Mikoto said in a superior tone, as if the princess does not bow before anyone, but actually just 2 or 3 days ago I also bowed before guild leader Collard. Oh no, if that gets leaked out I'm gonna die, Collard, geez. I quietly averted my eyes from Mikoto. It seems that the healing spell was effective because Carlos began to rise unsteadily, and bowed his head where he stood. I have done something impolite. It's inexcusable for me, Your Highness. Don't mind it, instead, give your thanks to Her Majesty, Hyuki. Saying so, Prince Ashel loaned his shoulder to Sir Carlos, and they stood up together. Your relations.H.I+P is surprisingly good, isn't it? To tell you the truth, he is my foster brother. At the time we were born, as babies we had our first bath together, that's how our relations.H.I+P is. In addition, I always troubled him every time I did something absurd. Prince Ashel smiled like an innocent child. On the contrary, Sir Carlos turned his face away, unable to bear his embarrassment. I see, so this is what's called a bromance? I don't have any friends, so I don't understand it very well. Once again, Prince Ashel sat on his seat and Sir Carlos stood behind him. Angelica turned her head towards Sir Carlos in worry, but he lightly shook his head and showed her that he was all right. By the way, continuing the middle of our conversation, I wish for Princess Hyuki to postpone the invasion of the royal capital. Responding to Prince Ashel's words, I made a pondering gesture and sound while C.O.C.king my head in puzzlement. Well, there is currently no official notice or ultimatum, so presently an immediate outbreak of war should not happen. But tell me, why do you think it is better that I wait? The wind's direction is changing. After saying that, Prince Ashel explained the current situation within the kingdom. Amisha Kingdom, which calls itself a kingdom, doesn't have an absolute monarchy. The most influential N.O.bless in the House of N.O.bless Parliament are currently trying their best to keep complete control. The present king was by no means stupid, but it can't be said that he was clever either, since essentially he was a puppet of the parliament. With such conditions, part of the military's personnel, N.O.bless, and influential people who supported Prince Ashel or who were part of royalty revival faction were dissatisfied. They secretly conducted preparations to overthrow the House of N.O.bless Parliament. However, against the overwhelming numbers within the Parliament, the prince's faction stood powerless. Therefore, the faction had been making preparations for many years. And thereupon, an uproar suddenly happened in Ara City and the Demon Kingdom Imperial Crimson displayed their mighty existence. All the people who have suffered from the N.O.bless oppression, as well as N.O.bless and influential people who kept their neutrality up until now, became aware of the need to join hands. With that, our voice to start a movement and bring a new doctrine to this stagnant country was heard, and so our movements suddenly became more active. I see. In short, we became a black S.H.I+P that made contact for the first time with this country. TL, hey. Enjoy your history lesson //in.wikipedia.org/wiki/black_s.h.I+PS. In other words, you want us to cooperate to carry out a coup d'état and overthrow the House of N.O.bless. Well, generally, even when something like a coup d'état happens, it's merely a change of leaders and the present condition will not change, but with this prince's ability, perhaps the conditions could become considerably better than they are now. However, after hearing the question of mine, Prince Ashel shook his head. No, our movement is definitely to defeat the current rotten N.O.bless who are controlling the government, but we don't necessarily want to shed blood. Does Princess Hyuki know of the concept of a democracy? Prince Ashel said it with glittering eyes like he was displaying a valuable treasured item. On contrary, however, my whole body in an instant calmed down as I started to lose interest. We have constructed a basic idea where the likes of royalty would be just a decoration like what it has been up until now. It's not gonna be a problem, even without them. There will be none of the N.O.bless that govern the people through blood lineage. People will manage the country with their own ideals. That's what this GRA.S.S roots movement is. Now, the seeds have already been sown. All that is left is to raise and nurture the buds. That is what I must do for the sake of building a better country. Although Prince Ashel voiced his thoughts strongly, partway through I was only half listening to it. I started thinking about it in my mind. Prince Ashel, I already know of the future outcome of your ideal. It certainly might be more preferable than the current N.O.bli system. Still, you definitely are royalty after all. Even though you carry such lofty ideals, humans are rotten, there are still some that can't be saved and should die. Therefore we ask that you give us some time. With that time, first we would establish a lower house parliament to take up opposition against the House of N.O.bless parliament, and then we intend to steadily remove their political power. With the current conditions we will certainly receive the support of the Ma.S.ses. Later, we want to ask you for a formal diplomatic relations H.I+P with us. To sum it up, that's how it is. Well, I am okay with waiting, but realistically, is that honestly something that could be accomplished in a few days? During that time, my country could also receive the same letter officially. In that situation, even I did not plan to restrain my country's citizens. But to be more accurate, I can't restrain my country's citizens. We definitely can. For that reason my comrades and I will do the best we can. Well, if by some chance we manage to fail and war breaks out with your country, I will quickly take Angelica and my allies to defect to your country. Afterwards, what Princess Hyuki would do with the House of N.O.bless Parliament is none of my concern. Honestly, it didn't seem that easy, however Prince Ashel still laughed fearlessly. I understand. So for the brief time while you prepare, I shall monitor quietly. And also, here, I took out a sword from my back pocket and placed it on the table. At the look in Prince Ashel's eyes which screamed, "Can I touch it?" I gave him a nod. This is a fine sword. I can feel magical power from inside of it. Is this some kind of magic sword? It is called a wind sword. It possesses the wind attribute, so it is lighter and can be handled more nimbly than a normal sword. Well, that is the extent of the sword, so I will give it as a replacement for the sword which my attendant broke some time ago. Wah! Sir Carlos widely opened his eyes in surprise. By the way, for your information, this sword is not exactly just a wind sword, it is a wind sword plus 3. The additional effect is that it increases your AGI by 18%. Well, to be frank, this sword could be made with basic weapon forging, and when I viewed the stall holder in my castle town, originally it was an NPC stall, but as of now, it's obvious that a living dwarf built it. There was a mountain of similar elemental equipment like this, but in this world it seems that this type of magic sword almost never appears on the market, so it's natural to be surprised. Prince Ashel seemed to be surprised as well, but he instantly replaced the broken sword on his back with a delighted look on his face. I am grateful for this sword. This sword from you will be my charm. With this, for the sake of my rose-colored marriage with Princess Hyuki, I shall defeat those N.O.bless at any cost. Stop thinking about that marriage thing already. How should I put it? Even though I accepted Prince Ashel's invitation right now, it's only because I want to see the ability of an S rank, you know. That's a bit. I beg your pardon, but there's no way I could win if we fought seriously. Well, if it's purely sword technique, that could be interesting. Even though he said it like that, his eyes said that he wouldn't lose. Shall we try? I really want to, but now is not the time. Would you please wait until this matter is finished? He shook his head in great disappointment. This prince, he really is a military man. Sigh, it cannot be helped then. After I said that, the malicious air was gone. Is this where we should part ways? So I thought and began to stand. Thereupon I was halted by Prince Ashel. Actually, until this matter is finished, it was scheduled that Angelica will be sheltered, under pretext of a vacation, in the royal family resting villa at Fulvia Lake on the outskirts of the royal capital. So Princess Hyuki, if you have time, please come by and visit. In other words, preparations in case his movement manages to fail, is it? Angelica, Without considering those circuit-misdances at all, grasped and shook both of my hands with a pure smile. How fantastic! Oni-sama, we must absolutely go there together. For the time being, I give her a nod properly. At Fulvia Lake the water is so clear. Furthermore, there's a hot spring Gus.H.I plus NG out near it, and there is a hot spring in the villa too. Oni-sama, let's soak in hot spring together. Hot spring, bathing together. I greatly regret that I made a nod. Well then, let's prepare the return coach Carlos, I entrust it to you. Yes. Sir Carlos put on his mask for the masquerade ball and left the room. Seeing Carlos, I casually asked the prince a question on my mind. Come to think of it, weren't we supposed to meet in the masquerade hall? That question for some reason made Prince Ashel look sullen. At first I planned to do so, but Princess Hyuki, what was with that mask? If it makes you stand out that much, then no one would address you. What's with this mask's bad reputation? It's a disaster, Your Highness. The military police have surrounded the building, they said that rebel have come in here. They're going to check the ident.I.T of every predict.I.P.ant. At the doorway Sir Carlos returned, panting heavily. Prince Ashel and I reflexively looked at each other. It seems both of us have memories of being treated as a rebel. It appears that this was bound to happen eventually. Prince Ashel gave a sigh and stood up. So what shall happen to us? Nothing will happen. I am going to try this sword and enjoy dancing to the tune, it's the long-awaited masquerade ball after all. While clapping his sword handle, Prince Ashel put on a white mask. Is that so? Then I would like to be your dance partner, Mikato, I entrust Angelica to you. I put on my mask, that somewhat had a bad reputation, and drew a life force-enhanced water sword +2 from my back pocket. The Sinner of Rose Gilles de Rice is too conspicuous and also overkill, so it would be hard to go easy on my opponents. With that, I followed him. Affirmative, Princess. Mikato, who put on the same mask, helped Angelica up while covering for her. While doing so, Angelica put on her mask that she was wearing back then. Now, shall we dance, Princess? Treat me gently, Prince. Coming out to the hallway, we exchanged expressions with each other as if we really were going to dance afterwards. End.